Welcome to the Jack Duffley Show, a weekly podcast exploring investing, real estate, the markets, law, technology, and everything in between. Here's your host, Jack Duffley.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very second episode of the Jack Duffley Show. I'm your host, Jack Duffley, and I'm joined with my good friend and classmate from the esteemed College of Law at Chicago, Kent in Chicago, Gina Qualter. Gina and I actually became pretty good friends over this last year. We actually participated in Moot Court, which is a very nerdy fake court competition that many law schools do. Chicago Kent has a pretty good team, and we got to know each other really well. Gina's a pretty interesting person, so I thought it'd be great to have her on the show. And Gina, you want to introduce yourself and let our listeners know a little bit more about what you're doing right now?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the esteemed Jack Duffley radio show, Jack.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah. Great to be here. Nothing else to do during quarantine. So I'm Gina, as Jack said, and I go to law school with Jack in the evenings. And during the day, I am also working on my PhD in cancer biology at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And I'm about to enter my final year of the program, so kind of wrapping up, concluding some research. And this whole pandemic, this COVID-19 thing, has been a really unique experience while getting the PhD, at least. So typically I'm in the lab every day doing research for prostate cancer, researching a great drug to help treat and prevent prostate cancer. But during the pandemic, the whole science community is all hands on deck with this COVID thing to find a cure, to find a treatment, a vaccine, anything. So that's been interesting during the day, and then Zoom School of Law in the evening. So
there's a lot to unpack there. So
yes.
I know you said you've been doing some research for prostate cancer. What does that look like? What sorts of things are you doing with that?
Yeah. So with prostate cancer, when you're doing your PhD, you pick an advisor. We call them principal investigators, and they're very established in their field. They're very specialized into a subset of a field. So my advisor, Dave McCormick, is a toxicologist by training and very involved with prostate cancer research. So that was just, the nature of my project right off the bat. And, prostate cancer, a lot of people get it. A lot of men get it in their older age, not as malignant as a lot of other types of cancers, typically very treatable. So when he said, "Hey, Gina, you're doing prostate cancer," you go into cancer biology and you're like, I'm going to do something sexy like brain cancer or breast cancer, something very tangible, something that you feel like you're making a difference. And when I started out, I was like, well, prostate cancer, what is there left to do in there? There's a lot of treatments already, but there's a subset of prostate cancer called castration-resistant prostate cancer. And, males, when they get it, they, oftentimes the first line of treatment is castration. And for whatever reason, the cancer just still keeps spreading, keeps growing despite that line of treatment. So the goal right now in the scientific community is to find a class of therapeutics to really treat this, to help these patients overcome this, because castrate-resistant prostate cancer has a very high propensity to become malignant. So what I do in the lab every day, I'm researching a drug called ARN-509, a very droid Star Wars-y type name, like CP3O type thing. And the goal is just, to do some experiments in an animal, to do some experiments in actual cancer cells we pull from patients, and just kind of see, is this drug working? How is it working? And can we use this in a clinical setting So.
And you've been testing a number of drugs or just one particular drug, and for how long have you been testing it yourself?
So I personally am just testing one drug. My advisor, he had, initially kind of looked into this drug in a rat prostate model, and found, very low toxicological effects, really promising for treatment, and wanted to kind of figure out, well, why is it working so well? And in a very malignant animal model, is it still able to have these same promising effects? So for the last about year and a half, we are working with a model of mice called the high-MYC mouse model. And high-MYC is overexpressed in prostate cancer. And it's associated with very malignant prostate cancer and this castration-resistant prostate cancer. So these male mice have this gene just overexpressed. And we've been treating them orally with ARN-509. And at the same time, we have prostate cancer cells from actual male prostate cancer patients. And we test it in just like a little petri dish. And the goal is the cell studies and the mouse studies. We want to see, okay, this drug, is it turning on the good genes? Is it turning off the bad genes? Why is it turning on the good genes? Why is it turning off the bad genes? And, the goal is you want to see in both models a reduction in tumor size in the mouse model. And in the cell model, the cells will replicate like they would in the human body. And the goal is we want to see at least a 60% reduction in that doubling of these cells. So far we've seen good results. So it's very, very promising, at least at early stages, but we have about another year of studies to see if we can move forward to some preclinical trials with this.
Now, you also mentioned that because of obviously the situation with COVID, you're on the front lines of that now. How has your role shifted there, and what are you doing with that whole situation?
So when this whole pandemic started, obviously a lot of businesses just in general outside of science thought, we can just kind of work around this. We can figure this out. We don't have to we don't have to close. We can just take precautions. But, ultimately with the quarantine, the stay-at-home order, at least in Illinois, a lot of labs ended up shutting down. A lot of outpatient care centers in the healthcare system shut down. Obviously restaurants, bars, all of that, as we know, are takeout, closed completely. And one way our lab was able to stay open, and we were able to keep doing this cancer research and research for other pathologies, was we agreed to research a vaccine and a potential treatment for COVID-19. And our lab has a BSL-3 lab, it's called, which you have your BSL-1, 2, and 3. And just what those numbers mean is the how infectious an organism are you working for or working with in those areas. BSL-3 meaning it's the most infectious and you have to take the most precautions. So I personally do not get to go in that section, but one of my other co-advisors does and is working very closely on that project. And, there's an animal component and a cell component, just like with the cancer research. And, he gets to go in that area. He has to do the full hazmat suit. There's a whole protocol that they follow going in and out. And just generally, if people are interested in what that looks like, it is a crazy, crazy process to scrub in and out of their hazmat in and out. Nature.com has a great video of a scientist, I think at Emory, going in and out. And it's a whole like half-hour procedure.
Is it mainly just testing potential medicines and maybe vaccines?
Yes.
Is it all of the above?
All of the above. All of the above. Right now, the science community is just throwing everything they can at it. And, once they isolate a organ or they isolate a cell or a protein from a cell, and it's able to come out of that BSL-3 area and it's inactivated. Then it comes to myself and other people in the lab, and we'll start looking at, we'll do a series of experiments on them to see, okay, well, did this drug have an effect? Did this vaccine have an effect on it? So it's definitely an assembly line process. So top of the chain.
I assume the cancer research has probably been tabled to make room for that, because that sounds like a pretty intense amount of time. Is that right?
I would say right now it's definitely a split between the two. There's still the cancer research going on, and there's still this COVID research going on, just because there is some concern in the medical and research communities that if we completely table the research for ALS, cancer, Alzheimer's, et cetera, that, the progress we've made in research in those areas will kind of regress or not progress as rapidly as it has been and as much as we would like. And people who still are very much experiencing these pathologies, these horrible illnesses, or their loved ones are, won't get the therapeutic effect on that, on a beneficial timeline if we completely put it by the wayside. So I would say that measures have been taken to make sure that the appropriate amount of time have been spent on both. And we have like cycles in the lab too, where people will kind of get assigned, well, your job is just COVID, your job is just cancer or Ebola or Zika virus or Alzheimer's or AIDS, or your job is a split between the both of it. So it's a lot of splitting the work up and, making sure that everyone is still, paying attention to everything still.
Hey listeners, for those of you in Chicagoland, I just launched jackduffleyagents.com. If you're looking to buy a home or investment property, definitely check out my new website. I'd be happy to help. I'd also be happy to put you in touch with a local attorney, lender, and inspector, just to name a few people. And if you want to rent a place in the Chicago area, I can help you with that too. Definitely check out jackduffleyagents.com if you need a Chicagoland real estate broker. Back to the show.
So in the same way that the medical community is juggling different disease priorities, different problems, I mean, you're juggling out yourself between not only cancer research and COVID research, but you're also doing law school. So what drove you to do that? How do you balance it all? I guess we'll start with one. Well, why law school at all if you got all these other things to worry about?
Yeah. When you start out in undergrad, and if you're in STEM, engineering, biology, physics, whatever, I think that there's this mindset that kind of gets pushed on you in academia, like, oh, you're in science, you're an engineer, so therefore you have to do academia, you have to work at a pharmaceutical company, you have to work at Boeing or Tesla or one of these. But I was very lucky starting out in that I had a great professor, Charlie Krikorian. He is a JD, PhD, MD. He has all the D's after his name. And he really made sure to kind of show students that you can go into these other fields, you can get these other degrees to supplement if you want to stay in a very traditional science field. So it had always been in my mind. And then my PhD program, I've been able to work in a more, it's a nonprofit, very like business structured laboratory, not a traditional academia lab. And a lot of the PhDs there have a JD or an MBA or something to kind of supplement their PhD background. And it's great because it helps scientists get venture capital. It helps them make more informed decisions on how they go about research, the most efficient way to do it, how to, if they come up with something novel, how to protect their intellectual property. A lot of times, graduate students, sometimes in corporate labs, if you invent something, and someone's over you, you have overhead, and you don't understand that, well, that's my intellectual property, here's the steps I can take to protect it, or here's what I'm entitled to from this invention. You can definitely be taken advantage of in a way. So my university was trying to start a PhD JD program because some other, universities in Chicago have this. And I was approached and said, hey, do you want to set this up? Is this something you would be interested in kind of being our guinea pig for? And knowing all of this information, I was very much on board with it. I was terrified because that is a big commitment. That's a lot of time. And it was very hard at first. And as Jack well knows, your second year, when you start to add on other law school commitments that are beneficial, like a moot court or a law review or anything really, it gets, it gets a little overwhelming at times. But just as long as you have a schedule, you'll feel that pressure, but you won't, succumb to it completely. So I think the biggest thing for me is just having a solid schedule and people to talk to about it. And,
So if I understand correctly, it's primarily to kind of give you a better understanding of some of these issues that you might run into when you're developing new technologies in the medical profession, especially. So it helps you there, and also helps to protect other people in your lab that you might be working in who develop a new technology or some sort of intellectual property, and they want to protect that. So it seems like
yes.
that's a primary motivation. Is there another goal that you might have with getting your law degree? Do you want to end up in a particular role at some point, or do you just want to be on the front lines in the lab for the foreseeable future?
I think the jury is still out on this one. I really would like to go to medical school. That's always been like my end goal with this whole thing was to be an MD, PhD, and I've always admired MD PhDs, how they're working in the clinical setting, they're working with patients, and they're also doing research that they can translate to the clinical setting to really help their patients. I think that's very noble. That's something I'm very passionate about, at least. And my goal would be to do that and, use the JD to kind of help me run my own lab, or to even potentially start my own clinic up in my own lab. I would really like to get into maybe some entrepreneurial aspects of that while still practicing medicine and doing research, like a Elon Musk type situation. He started Tesla, he started all these great companies, and he used his background to inform that and really come up with some amazing inventions, like the Tesla, like oh God, I'm blanking. The rocket. What's the rocket?
SpaceX.
SpaceX. And I think that's really great. I would love to do that.
It reminds me of a book. I've definitely recommended it to you before, Gina, but Range by David Epstein kind of
Yes.
talks about that idea of having a multifaceted approach to really everything, and bringing in perspectives from different areas gives certain people different advantages when they do actually end up trying to specialize in something. Is
Yeah.
when you have this breadth of knowledge or perspective, it can only help you. So I think that's really cool that you're going to be able to bring many different perspectives into probably at least the medical field, and that will help them. That can't serve to hurt you, I would assume. So that's pretty awesome. What words of advice do you have for maybe someone else who is kind of caught between ideas and isn't sure if they want to do law school or maybe med school or something else? What's your word of advice to someone who might be unsure about where they're trying to head?
Oh, this is a great question. I would say if you have the patience and you have the support system and, the financial backing of a scholarship or something like that, don't be afraid to do both. Growing up, my parents are both first generation college students. And my mom said something my grandfather always told her was, get as many degrees and certificates as you can. If it interests you, just go for it, just do it, because you never know when it will benefit you later in life. And she did that. She went on to do that, and she, raised me with that mentality. And I've been so thankful for that, because I see her, like how all of these certifications she's gotten. She has, several degrees, and my father also, and it's just benefited them and has allowed them to kind of pivot into these different roles throughout their lives and pursue these different interests and still be, very successful in whatever field they're pivoting into. So I would say do that. But if you had to pick one, like let's say like I'm not about law school and med school, I just want to do one or the other, I would think just talk to people in the field and see, shadow people, follow people, and see if this is something really you can see yourself doing long term. Because if you get that degree, it's an investment of your time, your money, your loved one's time. So you just want to make sure like you're passionate about it and you really want to go for it.
That's a really good point, especially about asking other people first if you're unsure. That's a great way to get some perspective in any field. It doesn't have to be a particular one. Often, at least what I found is that often people who might be in a position that you're considering going for will be flattered when you reach out to them and ask for their perspective on things. And I'm sure it's the same for you, Gina. And people typically like to help out other people. And if they don't like helping out other people, maybe it's not worth trying to work with them anyways. But it's a give and take for sure. And even as a student, when you might not have a ton to give other than some enthusiasm, you'll be surprised at how much more experienced folks will be willing to tell you about. But Gina, what brought you specifically to the Chicago area? Is this where you want to stay for the foreseeable future? Do you plan on taking your expeditions nationally, or are you trying to stay in the Chicago area?
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago, so that is what brought me here, is birth. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I love it. I think Chicago's a great city. We tell it to you straight, and people are just very real. And I love a change of seasons. So I like snow. So all good things. But it's been really great to receive an education in the city, I think, because we do a lot of things well, right? We have a lot of the most world-renowned hospitals in the world. We have Northwestern, we have U Chicago, IIT for research. And they're all pretty great about collaborating, communicating. And we have some great financial backers who are really passionate about funding these universities, funding these hospital systems. Like Craig Duchessois was my benefactor for my bachelor's and master's, and he gives so generously to U Chicago and their hospital system. So I think that the ability to grow as a professional in law too, for example, is it's limitless in Chicago, I think. But that being said, I would like to do maybe a brief stint in like a Palo Alto, Silicon Valley type deal,
who wouldn't?
Just see what it's like, just go out there for maybe, I don't know, 4 years or something, maybe do my residency or med school or a postdoc out there. That would be really cool, I think.
There's no limit, that's for sure. Gina, before we wrap up, I definitely want to get any book recommendation from you. You got one for us?
I have two for you, Jack.
Excellent.
So for those of you that like the nonfiction, I don't know how to say this, like
the personal development, the action taking, that kind of stuff.
Yes. So this book was actually recommended to me by you, Jack.
Oh, excellent.
And was lent to me by the lovely Hubert Zanchek.
Another one of our classmates.
Yes. Hubert, I'm sorry I butchered your last name. But it's Elon Musk by Ashley Vance. And I've always been a fan of Elon, weird bird, but so brilliant. And he also has such a huge range of things that he does, that he learns about. His family is super interesting too. Very versatile.
Definitely. Well said.
Yeah. So, and his parents, like I had no idea all the cool stuff that they did. So definitely recommend that. And then just like a classic book, the movie, the new version of the movie just came out. It's called Emma by Jane Austen. And people hear Jane Austen like, oh, she just writes romance novels. But I think she was so brilliant in that she had this very subtle humor that people, sometimes don't always realize when you're reading her book. So Emma has a very good comedic component of it, and it's just very, very real and very ahead of its time. So, I love that book.
Alrighty. And then lastly, if any listeners want to reach out or get in touch with you, learn something from you, Gina, since you got all these different perspectives going, where can our listeners reach out to you?
Yes, they can reach me on my Instagram, and I always forget my handle, so give me a sec.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's G Qualts, and I'll spell it because that Qualts. People are like Qualts. GQUALTS. Yes, on Instagram, you can, follow me or DM me if you have questions.
And with that, Gina, thank you very much for coming on to the Jack Duffley Show. Probably have you on at least in a few years and see where all these different paths are leading you. Maybe sooner, we'll see. And
Yes.
I wish you the best of luck with everything. And definitely thank you for all the work you're doing on the COVID front line, since we all definitely need that right now. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Jack Duffley Show. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss any new episodes. For more content on personal finance, real estate, and other topics, check out jackduffley.com.